Back in 2020, I saw this amazing TikTok by YouTuber Rowan Ellis. Hey girl, I will get back to you about that collaboration, I swear. And it was about the puritanical desire for perfect characters in media.
It's No Nuance November, and here's my particular hot take. Way too many of you have been sucked into the idea of cancel culture and specifically thinking that not just actions but people can be inherently problematic, and this is really spilled out into your understanding of fiction. I've seen way too many of you read a blurb for a book or movie and decide that the description of that character means that the entire thing is problematic. Like it would be about a biracial character who's embarrassed by the particular food that his mum packs at lunchtime, or a character who worries that she's never going to find love because she's asexual. The whole point of most fiction is that people learn lessons.
After watching it, I decided I wanted to Google redemption arcs and see which one were the most popular because, I don't know, I was looking to be punished. And the results were oh so aggravating. Damn. It gave me a lot of thoughts, not just about the nature of redemption arcs, but also why we are so obsessed with the idea of redemption in general. Initially, this video was just going to be about redemption arcs, but then I realized something. It's more than just redemption. It's about the way in which amoral characters have to be allowed to exist and thrive in media without every single choice they make being seen as a moral reflection of the audience. It has to do with the way in which a lack of critical reading skills have applied into watching skills and have made it so that audiences really feel this attachment to characters that can sometimes be unhealthy. Redemption arcs have become a very polarizing topic in fandom discourse. People have begun to see redemption arcs at times being used as a get out of jail free card that gives passes to abusers. This is not particularly a narrative that I agree with. However, I do think it is part of this discourse in fandom about how we have used social justice language and sometimes bring social justice expectations to how we deal with narrative. Also, as someone who has learned to be nuanced and admit that sometimes I'm just villain simping, yet it is clear by looking at this list with only one female character on it that, like most things, even redemption is something that is sometimes skewed along those oh so chaotic gender lines. But also redemption itself comes with expectations, both from the audience, media, and our own desire to defend our messy favorite baddie by hoping one day the story will make us feel much better about liking them and not the titular good character.
Daddy, I don't know what to do.
Editor Princess here to tell you that this video is sponsored by CuriosityStream. A sponsorship? Me? It came true. As someone who loves documentaries and has been working on a 3-part video about monarchy and female monarchs, I don't know why I do these things to myself. It has been great to check out this series, The Story of Europe, on CuriosityStream. This has been a great way to get an overview of all the information and history of the period without having to pull up every single book in my library about the topic, of which there are many. It has thousands of documentaries and exclusive content, award-winning exclusive content, and it's just a great resource about educational topics, about a wide range of things, including some great stuff about Martin Luther King, since it is technically King Day when I'm recording this part of the video. And yes, it's one of those weirdos who loves to watch documentaries and thinks it's an important art form, because it is. I'm really excited to be sponsored by a service that does things that I genuinely enjoy. And when you use my URL, CuriosityStream/melinapendulum, you will be able to get CuriosityStream for a year for just $14.79, which is 26% off. And you know we love us a discount in this household. And also, as long as you have access to CuriosityStream, you will also get Nebula for free $99, the most important number in the game. And Nebula is a really great place to support creators such as myself. I am now going to be uploading exclusive content on Patreon and Nebula, and plan to do at least one Nebula exclusive video a month, because there are a lot of weird ideas that I have in my head that I am sort of anxious about because of the algorithm and its hatred of doing anything new. Creators like Sarah Zed, Lindsay Ellis, and others have already made really great content that was accessible on Nebula before anywhere else. Y'all remember the Omegaverse video? And so it's just a great way to support things. It's ad-free, love that. So if you want to support me or to support educational YouTubers and educational content creators in general, here's a place to do it. Curiosity Stream. Use my URL. It supports this channel. It supports other people. And you know me, I love using any sort of format and able to create accessible entertainment for people, and this helps make it more accessible and ad-free, and you don't have to worry about accidentally getting recommended let's just say radicalizing content of a different persuasion. But this way you get to see what creators can get up to when they're not living in constant fear of the algorithm, and also get to enjoy some fun extra bits. I will be having, at least for this month, my reviews and thoughts on WandaVision and Soul up on Patreon and Nebula exclusively. We're sponsored now! Let's get into what exactly is redemption. Well, like a conservative justice on the Supreme Court, I decided to look at the dictionary for my first answer. Redemption, the action of saving or being saved from sin, error, or evil. A very passive definition, if you ask me. And I feel like a lot of our modern concepts of redemption are rooted through the lens of Christianity TM. The idea that you can truly, at the last moment, see the error of your ways, turn to Christ and say, my bad. That, as a modern day person, especially someone who is Black and queer, seems to be getting off a bit easy considering what the person was guilty of. There is no question of accountability or restorative justice, just the personal internal satisfaction and peace of being saved from sin. But what gets tricky is that what does this mean for the people that you have harmed? Are people required to congratulate you for realizing that murder, rape, assault, etc. is wrong after the fact? Is getting that kind of acknowledgement the point of a redemption journey? In my opinion, a lot of this happens because we tend to confuse redemption and atonement. Atonement is reparation for wrong or injury, and an excellent movie starring Saoirse Ronan. When we are looking at characters who have a redemption arc, we are often looking for atonement from them. Actually seeing them come to terms with what they have done and actually correcting the error of their ways, doing the work to being better. This is why when it comes to the character of Anakin Skywalker, aka Darth Vader, there has been so much discourse as to if the character actually redeemed himself. The narrative itself says that he has obviously turned from evil because he gets to be a Force ghost and he gets to connect with his son. However, the reason why that redemption can sometimes seem not real to a lot of us is because he never went on a journey. He never had a full character arc that showed us why he turned from the dark side. We just are meant to assume from his personal connection with Luke and hearing his son call out to him, just flipped a switch in his soul. And that is it's unsatisfying to us as an audience who would want to see the genocidal tyrant actually do something. But then again, Star Wars isn't a narrative that was necessarily built to be that complicated. I mean, it was paint by numbers as it goes. And the same issue follows down to the next generation with Kylo Ren, aka Ben Solo.
Kylo Ren is dead. My son is alive.
Sure, Jan.
The reason why I think many of us, outside of all of the discourse, find Kylo's story so unfulfilling is because it is not very well written, and we do not get a lot of context as to why he is the way that he is. And then eventually, because his mama gotta die for him, he stopped being dark-sided, he kisses Rey, he's good again, I guess. And the fact that we have to go to source materials outside of the films to get any sort of discussion about who Kylo Ren was, who Ben Solo is, since apparently they're two different people. Okay, the only time we get Vader, Anakin, having to deal with what he did to his daughter is in a book that is no longer considered canon because Disney. Again, I say that with love. And I did watch The Mandalorian, I enjoyed it, but it is true how funny it was that people just wanted Luke with a lightsaber, just like that Patrick Willem video said that we did. But let's get get back to this whole redemption thing. Now, even with this whole difference between redemption and atonement, that doesn't get to the core of this larger issue of redemption being used to excuse abuser narrative that has been created. And this has to do, in my opinion, with a larger issue of how media has taught us that we should expect characters to evolve and change, including bullies. As I was working on this video, I was reminded of my youth when I, embarrassingly, was a Draco Malfoy fangirl. If you were a part of the Harry Potter fan fiction community before the publication of the Half-Blood Prince, when shit was going way off the rails if you ask me, and especially if you were in my little dirty Draco section of the internet, there were 3 things you usually saw. Blaise Zambini was white. 2, he was usually Draco's best friend. 3, Draco was a victim of child abuse. Lucius Malfoy was an abuser and a cheater. Narcissa was like negligent and alcoholic. Basically, they justified Draco's actions and made him a sympathetic character by making him a child of abuse and neglect from his rich, posh, stush family. And that eventually he was gonna probably join the Golden Trio and be the token bad teammate. I even remember watching television programs that were like breaking down the mythology and everything of Harry Potter, and they were telling me that was the path this character was likely gonna take because of literature, mythology, all kinds of shit, not just fan fiction, based on academia. And while I'm absolutely sure that this desire to wibify Draco would have happened anyway, I think casting Tom Felton in the role certainly helped things along, because I don't remember liking Draco as much until Tom Felton appeared in the Prisoner of Azkaban trailer, and he looked mad good, and I think that was the beginning of the end for me. But I'm bisexual trash, and I'm open about that with you, with the world. Yes. Around this time, most media was telling us that bullies were just people who had been bullied themselves, usually at home. So if Draco is a racist bully, he must be suffering on the inside. Surprise! He wasn't. He was just a racist. But we have been taught to search for depth within these rival characters because they are meant for something better. Even Dragon Ball Z taught me if you beat someone's ass enough, he gonna be your best friend. Like, y'all gonna figure it out. This is just a process to friendship. Another example would be in the Glee fandom. Before Karofsky's father was revealed, I remember in fanfiction his father was assumed to be homophobic and abusive, and then surprise, he wasn't. Dave Karofsky was just dealing with his own internalized homophobia and became a bully because we live in a homophobic society that encourages that kind of behavior. Period.
I made your life a living hell for months. But when the same thing happened to me, I couldn't even take it for a week.
I think a lot of this comes from the mythology that happened a lot post-Columbine, that violent bullies must have faced trauma in order to be the violent people that they are today. And while a lot of the myths about Columbine have been broken down, especially if you are into true crime, that still exists today, and how we feel the need to explain why someone must be hurting deep, deep down inside, and therefore we always are overanalyzing every intention when sometimes people can just be bad. We want to see characters get better and change, and eventually Draco did that. But he was never redeemed. He grew up off screen and stopped being a hateful person, unlike J.K. Rowling. The only way to really get better and change is to have your actions reflect that. So we're looking for one big giant moment to encompass everything rather than looking at the small moments that indicate that people are growing. We also have a larger issue of understanding that we don't have to make excuses for enjoying villain protagonists. It is okay to enjoy the bad guy without turning into a sexist misogynist in the process. And that has its roots in an era of media that really highlighted how general audiences are not always great at critically consuming media. Epic of Gilgamesh, the titular Gilgamesh starts off as a brutal, oppressive ruler, and the gods decide to make a wild man named Indeku to challenge Gilgamesh. They wrestle and become best friends.
Two bros chilling in the hot tub, 5 feet apart cause they're not gay.
The two men traveled together and the gods were like,
"This is literally not what we made him for, like..."
And they kill Indeku, and heartbroken by the death of his best friend, Gilgamesh sets out in search of immortality. He ultimately fails, but in the process of this journey, he learns valuable lessons about arrogance and returns to rule his kingdom as a wiser, humbler king. So all of that raping, tyrannical behavior just swept under the rug because, hey, he learned from it, and that's what matters. Anti-heroes and villain protagonists and jerks who become good have always been a thing. But with the 1999 HBO series, The Sopranos, it was given a brand new lease on life and popularity. You can plot the trajectory of male characters that are leads in these kind of shows, from Tony Soprano to Walter White, Don Draper, Dexter Morgan, to BoJack friggin' Horseman. As Brad Martin puts in Difficult Men, not only were the most important shows of the era run by men, they were also largely about manhood. In particular, the contours of male power and the infinite varieties of male combat. Why that was had to do with a cultural landscape still awash in post-feminist dislocation and confusion about exactly what being a man meant. The struggle is real. I'm watching The Sopranos right now, like it's on my TV behind me. It's the first time I've ever watched it, and I love it. It makes me immensely mourn the death of James Gandolfini, even more than I already did, and I am bothering my girlfriend with all my terrible bad Italian. Tony Soprano, with his anxiety, his panic attacks, but his broad smile and charisma, is just a very interesting, engaging figure, and the show doesn't shy away from any of his negative traits. He is a murderer, an adulterer, a racist, a homophobe, and at his core, a person who believes that the bloody ends justify the means. You are rooting for him because the character is engaging, not because you agree with the morality of his actions. And the show is very clear on that. And what's interesting when I was reading this book about it is that as commonplace as these bad villain protagonists are now and how prominent they are, at the time, the decision to have Tony kill a man in the 4th episode of the show was seen as very controversial, because you were making the murderer, a murderer, the center of the show. And that was big. And it was showing that an audience could still relate to somebody even if they were flawed. And this is important. The flaws are built into how the character is constructed. The fact of the matter is that Tony is a sexist. He's a misogynist. And while you can enjoy watching him do his thing, you aren't supposed to co-sign those actions. And when you do, it's more a reflection of your own Tony Soprano-like flaws than the show itself for making a character with those flaws. I don't turn on the show and ask for it to speak to my moral fiber, nor do I think that watching The Sopranos will corrupt you or make you a racist. Like, if hearing Tony Soprano call black people ditsuns over some gabagool is gonna really corrupt you, then maybe the issue is you, not The Sopranos. Something that I think people truly forget is that when we find ourselves drawn towards characters who are amoral, that's okay. Tony is a fantastic character. Yes, he's a character who has dealt with some kind of trauma, but that doesn't explain away his horrible behavior, and no one is asking you to make excuses for him. We as an audience need to change the way that we sometimes interact with these characters and stop putting all of this moral grandstanding onto them. This period in television is responsible for what I call the tepid takes industry, of which I am proudly a part of. Many audience members, especially the male fan base, projected and absorbed the sexism, misogyny, and flaws of the leading male characters, to the point where, as the internet age slowly broke down the fourth wall, it became key for writers and producers and cast members to say, this person is the bad guy. do not root for them, or at the very least, stop harassing the actress who plays Skylar on Breaking Bad. Look at how BoJack Horseman needs to tell its audience that BoJack is flawed over and over and over again.
Ina, what I did to you, I saw the video, and it looked pretty bad.
Yeah, I'll say it was pretty bad. It was assault.
Yeah.
You physically overpowered me, and if there were any justice, you would be in jail right now.
Okay.
Yet many are just so consumed with BoJack getting redemption that they forget that the story is not necessarily a redemption arc. It is about the cyclical nature of someone trying to change but having so much trauma, self-loathing, and entitlement that they cannot. Good and compelling characters do not always equal good people, and that's fine. Not every damaged and flawed character is served from having a redemption story, and a character realizing they have messed up is not always an indicator of them going, I'm gonna change now. Sometimes the cyclical nature of destruction is the point. Wanting to do better, hoping to do better, and then just fading into blackness all over again. You don't have to root for Tony Soprano as a human being to enjoy him as a character. And when we limit the ability for characters to be this interesting, we're not harming these white male cis characters of the past. We're hurting the future representation of marginalized voices who are finally getting to be messy protagonists. And what's important is not that we can't have the conversation about if these characters are abusive or if the narrative is being clumsy in its handling of those things, because those are important conversations to have. What is the problem is when it is assumed that if you like these things inherently, regardless of context, regardless of what the narrative is intending to do, you are co-signing abuse. Especially because, as we know, women and queer characters are often held to much higher standards than everybody else when it comes to being messy on television.
I spent $40,000 on shoes and I have no place to live?
Another kind of half-hour program emerged during this time, and that was the cable show. Not necessarily a sitcom that centered on women rather than men. It was comic itself, this chauvinism of the clock. A male suburbanite turned drug dealer was worthy of 60 Minutes, Breaking Bad, while his female counterpart, Weeds, warranted 30. Only with the advent of Damages did a female-centric show break through this new glass ceiling. Though a handful of women play hugely influential roles in this narrative as writers, actors, producers, and executives, there aren't enough of them. Behind almost every powerful, interesting anti-hero villain protagonist, there has been a female character, usually his wife or girlfriend, who people found more toxic than him because she was a nag, or worse, a hypocrite. Carmilla, Tara, Betty, Skylar, all of them dragged by the masses of the internet for being complicated, but not in a wish fulfillment type way. They were not appealing to the fantasy that Tony was. Some of the rare characters who did fit into that anti-heroine standard would probably be characters more like Carrie Bradshaw, even to a degree the Gilmore Girls, because they are chaotic in their own way, and one of my personal homegirls, Laurel Lance from Arrow. I mean, when you look at Laurel, she is this character who was an alcoholic, traumatized, angry, bitter, but was always working to be a good person. But the narrative was always more consumed with punishing her for even having feelings or emotions that were contrary to Oliver, that we were all made to find every decision that she made terrible, even though if you sat down and looked at it objectively, most of the time, she had a right to be pissed off. And if the writing isn't showing their side clearly, even if you as a viewer are connecting these emotional dots, people around you are saying, well, she has to be bad because this guy is the lead, and if she's making him upset, then she must be the bad guy. Even with children, we've seen literal children like Mabel from Gravity Falls or Lilo from Lilo and Stitch get called brats and abusive for just being kids. Damn, people call Aang an abuser because he's 12, like he's manipulating Qatar. And I'm just like, y'all, the language y'all are using is just so aggressive for the narratives that we're talking about. It doesn't help that in a sitcom like series or a more comedic series, it can be repetitive, but even now watching The Sopranos, Tony makes the same mistakes all the time. But we allow it because the program being an hour long and this highbrow series, we allow men to be messy. We do still hold women to an unrealistically high standard, especially if they're women of color or queer. Difficult women and difficult queer people have been struggling for so long to be allowed to reach basic milestones of storytelling opportunities, and to say that they can't be messy and can't be on their own sort of messy redemption arcs is very limiting. And what I find so frustrating is that when we do get female characters who do get complicated redemption arcs, they are often ripped apart in comparison to their male counterparts. Part of why I love Catra, the narrative was not afraid to let her go to dark places but still say that she was valuable, and it trusted almost foolishly, in my opinion, that considering that we have constantly made space for sad teenage imperialist boys, that we would make that same space for a female character, especially one who is brown.
Zuko here.
But I don't think people are quite there yet. I hope that one day that will change. It's a problem that we often frame redemption arcs as often people having to be in like the middle of the journey and then pivoting slightly. Like Xena Warrior Princess is an entire show that's a redemption arc. It's about a female character who was a warlord, having changed her ways and spending the rest of her life trying to do better. Bo from Lost Girl, her entire narrative redemption arc. She, when she found her powers, became a murderer by accident, and she is spending her time and energy now trying to fix that.
And whatever happened back then, it wasn't your fault.
I killed a boy. And then what? Then I ran away. I ran away. I didn't take responsibility for what I did. And his poor family. I never gave them closure.
Not every story about redemption is a person realizing at the 11th hour, I did something wrong. Sometimes it is a character having realized I've messed up and I want to do better. I'm still going to be a hot mess, but I'm doing my best. And also sometimes there's just messy wish fulfillment. I have seen people call Gone Girl Fight Club for white women, and as someone who has said good for her at the end of Gone Girl several times, it wasn't because I agreed with Amy. It wasn't because I didn't understand that the narrative was actually saying that this was actually a messed up decision on everyone's part. I just enjoyed rooting for a ruthless, cold, callous woman who didn't have daddy issues or some trauma that made her that way. Sometimes people make their feelings and their takes about the true villain on a show or a film their personality, and it's like, it doesn't have to be your personality. It can just be something that we talk about and discuss. Like, isn't that more interesting?
To you.
Take my boy Shishomaru, the big bad older brother turned decent enough dude in the anime and manga series Inuyasha. After meeting his morality pet Rin, a human child that may be his wife in this spinoff, but that's another video. Literally, it's coming in like next week. The character's priorities slowly shift. Like, having Rin around changes his opinions and his apathy towards humanity, but he never goes out of his way to really help people. He just is not actively terrible towards them. He ends up saving his brother several times since they share a common enemy, but he's never like, bro, you know, do you want to go get some sake and chill because, you know, I was addicted to you for all your whole life? That never happens. Instead, we just see that character naturally soften, often not even as part of the A-plot, just him going from a self-absorbed hottie who only cares about power and himself to a self-absorbed hottie who loves maybe 5 people. Another example from anime, Papa Todoroki or Endeavor from My Hero Academia. Endeavor was introduced as this anti-hero, you know, definitely a hero, definitely a heroic person, but didn't inspire hope in others. He married his wife specifically for very eugenic-y reasons of wanting to have her abilities, ice, and his abilities, fire, to create the perfect RPG child who would be the perfect hero. And this led to him being emotionally abusive to his children and earning all of their resentment. In the 4th season, he achieves his long-term goal of being the #1 hero, but it's not through merit. And slowly through this, he realizes that, like, even though he's #1, he's never gonna bridge the gap between himself and his rival the way he's been acting. And so he starts slowly realizing that he needs to be the hero that'll make his son, Shoto, proud of him. And again, nothing traumatic happened to him. There is no one moment. It is him seeing that this isn't working because he wants his son to care about him. Sacrificial moments tend to be the biggest way people can detect a redemption arc, and I think the best example for this, and I'm gonna stick with anime because fuck it, anime is great, is gonna be Vegeta. I mean, has Vegeta redeemed himself? Probably not. I mean, he was a genocidal tyrant who blew up whole planets, but he has admittedly gotten better. I mean, if we were to track his character from the ending of the Frieza saga to the end of the Buu saga, not even counting Super, he is different in ways that count, but still keeps his core personality. Fatherhood initially didn't change him because, like, he's a child soldier. He probably doesn't even have a concept of childhood being real, and he was negligent and he was not supportive of his kid until a big moment happened. What's even more frustrating, just as a narrative thing, is that we never really get to see Vegeta in any of the transitional periods of his relationships with his family. Like, Blake got a child with Bulma. 10 years later, Boo married to Bulma, I guess. He domesticated and he hates it. Hence, we get the whole Majin Vegeta interlude where he gives himself over to these dark forces in order to defeat Goku, and then he defeats Goku and it hit different, and he's like, okay, actually I love my child, I love my girlfriend, I actually low-key love that nigga Kakarot too. So he decides to just become the anti-hero he was turning into anyway. We have seen this character be terrible and then give himself up for Earth. That is fantastic, and it's because it was allowed to happen. It wasn't just pushed into one moment. It's built up organically, and that's what makes it work. I think the narrative also is clear of letting us know that Vegeta has atoned in the eyes of whatever cosmic spirits control the Dragon Ball universe, because when they wish for everybody good to come back to life, he's included. Shout out to him. And does this mean that he has made up for destroying entire planets and having killed off half of his de facto friend group at some time? I'm sure Tina and Chaozu would say, no, that bitch has not. However, we don't talk to them and they're not important, so skirt. At no point do they say that Vegeta is not responsible for his bad actions. And even though it's an incomplete narrative in certain ways, it is still a fulfilling one. He's a family man who changes diapers and doesn't leave the Earth while his wife is pregnant, which we knew that he did during the Android saga. So those are the kind of redemption stories that are more interesting to me, when you can actually tell that something good is going to come from what their actions are now. I think the best example of this was Infinity Train's Book 3, which was amazing. Spoilers for it right now, but I would say if you have HBO Max, please go check it out. One of the things that's really frustrating about the discourse around Grace and Simon is that people are like, well, Simon was sad and he was manipulated by Grace. I'm like, Grace was also manipulated. She was wrong. She believed what she thought was true. They both were on the same page. When they got new information that said that they were wrong, one of them took it in and was like, my bad, I'm gonna try and fix it. The other one proceeded to keep murdering people and being the worst. So if you like Simon, who was going full Tetsuo in that season, that's okay. But let's not pretend that he wasn't making active choices, and it is his choices that led to him dying. Which I will say, Infinity Train Season 3 is fire, but girl, that was not for children. They ate his whole soul. I was like, you deserve that, but also that was a lot. It is not just one big moment. It is a person really struggling deep within themselves about who they were, who they want to be, and how to bridge the gap between those two things. And sometimes that is the focus of a story, like Catra. Sometimes it's on the background of a story, like Hordak. But I think despite how we might individually feel about it, what matters to me the most in any story about redemption, atonement, etc., is that the narrative is never asking the victims to excuse the abuse being given to them wholesale. Thank you to all the members of my Patreon for your support. I am back. I am here. Got a new recording equipment and everything. We are gonna do this stuff. I have so many things ready for you guys. Next episode is gonna be the next thing we're gonna stop rolling. The next thing that we're going to talk to is going to be a little interlude of just talking about Yashahime and all these shonen shows that want to do these weird baby spin-offs, but we don't care about none of these relationships. And then we're going to talk about Bridgerton. No, Sex and the City is officially revived by HBO Max. Why? No! Anyway. So I asked my followers on my Discord server if they had any questions concerning redemption arcs for this video. One question I got from Joey was, you talk about people confusing a redemption arc with a full redemption, but what's a redemption arc that makes you go, actually, fuck you? This is a really good one, and I think for me it would certainly be Theon Greyjoy. I think his redemption arc is really well done. I think that it's well written, and I think overall is very concise and makes sense, well acted, etc. I say fuck him for life. I really, really, truly dislike him. Like, he killed children for clout, and I just never really liked him. So I think he had a really good redemption arc. I just personally do not care for him. Another question I got from Space Boyfriend, hello, was, I'd love to listen to some commentary on the no one is above redemption theme, which is really common in shonen anime. I haven't watched much shoujo, but I imagine it's pretty common there too. I think because a lot of American media often has someone enter the story being bad and lead the story, vanquish, banish, etc. bad, contrasting would be fun, if you're interested. Now, I talked a lot about anime in this particular video because anime is the cornerstone of my identity because of Sailor Moon. And I think one of the things that's really interesting is that in a lot of anime that I grew up watching, like bad guys turning into good guys, or someone who was previously seen as like a really major antagonist becoming a friend, like in some ways the defeat, that humbling of the personality becomes sort of like, okay, well, you're good now. And the reason why I bring up Vegeta in this conversation is because we talk a lot about abusers and about these abuse narratives, and I kind of think about where Vegeta would fit into that today, because Vegeta is in very many ways an abusive, narcissistic, dangerous man who has been reformed through all of these acts. And I think anime more than anything has a lot of characters like that. Like, I think about even the Sailor Moon anime, where characters weren't just killed off sometimes, they were actually reformed. Nephlite, Prince Diamond and his brother, several of their henchwomen were turned into better characters. So I just wonder if maybe there is this question about protagonists not just being there to vanquish a bad guy or defeat an enemy, but that part of what they are doing is bringing salvation to these characters. And I think that kind of shows in sort of Steven Universe and She-Ra, where they are not just defeating an antagonist, but spreading a light, spreading a sort of salve, a bomb over everything, like being this guiding light. And I think that's something that anime is very big on doing, that goodness will eventually win over, and that if a person is willing to change, that they should be given the opportunity to do so. Of course, what I think happens in anime more so is that the character gets to live, and then by living gets to genuinely change and grow and evolve. And I think that's the biggest thing, is that a lot of times characters die because there is no room in the narrative to actually allow them to change. Where if you make them a supporting character or a side character, they can change in the background. You can tune in and you'll be like, oh, look at them, they're doing better. And I think that is even more important than anything else, because it's one thing to be redeemed in one big epic moment. It's another thing to show a character really evolve. And I think definitely Magical Girl anime, as a fan of that, there is a lot of like, I don't just want to kill you, I want to help you and save you. And I think that's noble. I think, like, for all the criticism I had about Wonder Woman 1984 for leaning into that so heavily, it's not because that's not a good instinct to have in a protagonist. It's all about how it plays out, how it works out, and if the narrative really makes those concepts of redemption and atonement as a core part of its storytelling than anything else.